Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live. That's 2 weeks in a row. I tripped up on the name. I'm having a thing with
Just
Star
in case
Citizen
anyone
Live.
was wondering if this was live or not.
Just in case you're wondering if it's live or not. Well, last week I went through 3 other names before I got to the right one. Star Citizen Live, the 2950 Imperator Election Special. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and we are going to jump right into it. Our guests are the esteemed members of the CIG narrative team. Let's take a few moments before we dive in, go around the circle and introduce yourselves, because for everybody's show, it's somebody's first show. Is that how it goes?
That's beautiful.
Everybody's show is somebody's first. No.
Very poetic.
We're off. We're just gonna start in the corner and go clockwise around. Sherry, you're in the first slot there. Who are you? What do you do for Star Citizen?
I'm Sherry. I'm the archivist and associate writer at Star Citizen. I manage and populate the Galactopedia, and I do star systems, planetary stuff, physics.
I don't know why. I expected you to scream physics like Ricola, and I don't know why. We'll just go around clockwise. It's one of those days already, people. Will, who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Oh, like normal clockwise. I'm lead writer Will Weisbaum. Hi, everyone. And I work on the narrative of Star Citizen, Squadron 42, the Persistent Universe, all that, coming up with storylines, writing stuff, dreaming the dreams. And I'm real happy to be able to be here to talk about the Imperator election.
I just realized why you're confused, because you're seeing a mirror version of the broadcast. So where on your screen I'm on the left, on their screen I'm on the right. So it's actually Sherry. That's why you were surprised.
Stage clockwise.
Stage clockwise.
Weird.
Stage clockwise.
Because to me you're on the right, Jared. But I guess mine's weird. Anyway,
let's not bring politics into this.
Sorry,
Dave. Who are
I'm
you?
Dave Haddock.
What do you do? And what's your favorite Michael Keaton movie?
I'm Dave Haddock. I'm the narrative director at Cloud Imperium. So I'm kind of just have my hands all over the place and do all sorts of weird stuff with Squadron 42, the Persistent Universe. We kind of help out with marketing stuff if they need it. Been here since the beginning. Happy SC birthday, by the way. Super excited.
Birthday. Yeah, happy birthday.
I have very fond memories of watching the Chris's GDC speech and laughing when the web broke out.
I was in Austin. Is that where the
Yes.
GDC was, or was it Houston? It was in Austin, right?
Austin. Yeah. But yeah, my favorite Michael Keaton movie, I would probably say either Jackie Brown or Beetlejuice. I think he's the best Batman.
Is Jackie Brown really a Michael Keaton movie? I feel like you have to be name on the poster above the title for it to be your movie.
Oh,
that's why Dave made his own Jackie Brown poster.
Oh. Yeah, I did a recut of it. If that's the case, then I would probably go Beetlejuice. Well, he's not above the title on Beetlejuice. I'd go Batman Returns then.
Batman Returns. Okay. Adam. Hi.
Hello. I'm Adam Weezer. I'm good. I'm a writer for CIG. So I work with Dave and Will and Sherry and assist on everything they just described. So if they need lore stories or item descriptions or anything, I'm here to help.
And just to give full kudos to Adam, he's been spearheading a lot of the recent election lore posts that you've been reading and doing an absolutely fantastic job with it. So I've been enjoying it, and hopefully you have. So thanks, Adam.
Yes.
Yeah, they're super good.
It's a good time to... Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate it, but yeah, it's a completely collaborative process that we've been working on for over a year and talking about and slowly kind of like thinking through. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to discuss details with everyone today.
So it's worth promoting. There is a post on the robertsspaceindustries.com website right now. It's up in the carousel along the top. I think it's in like the third spot if you need to look for it. That has a nice rundown of the candidates, as well as a complete listing of numerous posts that have gone out over the last several months, at the very least, as well as many Galactopedia articles that are available in the Galactopedia about each candidate and stuff like that. So before we dive into the questions, and we'll take questions live, and we'll take questions from Spectrum, whatever, let's recap this process up to this point first, because for somebody they're like, wait, you're doing an election? What? This has actually been going on for a while. We had some primaries already. Who wants to recap how we got to where we are right now?
Adam,
Should we all do it at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah. On the count of 3. So for the current election process, just a very broad overview for how we kind of drew it up is about a year out from October 8th. So a year ago, basically the UEE would open up entries for anyone who wanted to basically run for Imperator by submitting videos and filling out this questionnaire for what they would basically set out to accomplish as Imperator. And citizens were allowed to go watch these videos and start to vote and narrow down this extremely wide field to 10. So that's considered essentially the primary voting period. Then we reduce it down to 10 candidates, and those 10 candidates then have a few months to pitch their case to the wider citizens of the universe. And a secondary vote is then taken. I believe it's like mid-April in that range. Mm-hmm. And again, voting periods will last a few weeks, so it allows people from all around the empire to go into facilities or vote where they need to.
Yeah, because in the Empire, there isn't faster than light communication speeds. Everything has to go through jump points, and it takes a little bit longer. So they have a longer voting period to allow for the full collection of all the votes from all the systems to be brought together. So.
Yeah, and one of the things too with the opening, the idea is that it is literally open to all citizens. That like you don't have to be a politician, and the idea behind that was this notion that they wanted the best ideas to come from whoever. Like if someone has a really good idea and people react to it and respond to it, then you can be nobody and come from anywhere. And if your ideology or your plans or your viewpoint really resonate with people, then it's sort of built to allow you to progress. Now, obviously, more established political parties and political figures have a built-in base and awareness as far as like around
money.
And money.
Lots of money. Lots more money.
But again, that idea that it sort of opens it up for everybody, which is sort of more of an egalitarian kind of type.
When you say open to everybody, you mean citizens?
Yes.
Right. So only people who are actually established citizens of the UE. Is there any kind of age limit? Like we do 30, like for the United States, it's 35.
I think we discussed that, and I don't think we landed on a age limit because
or minimum age or anything.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, citizenship has, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to. I think that's like, I think it's 18 or.
I think it was 18.
Yeah, so 18-year-olds can absolutely be Imperator. You heard it here first.
Well,
as long as they're citizens.
Asterisk.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry,
yeah,
I mean, the open period and to highlight this kind of craziness and kind of like wide swath of candidates you get from the open period, we made the first post about that section, a Star Watch, where they were actually watching these different kind of like crazier candidate videos. So it was a way to kind of fill in the world so you guys would understand that there were this wide swath of people that were coming forward with very weird and strange options. And obviously some of them are just looking for attention. Most of them, like Dave said, aren't going to be able to reach the top 10 because they're not going to get the general support. They won't have the money or the built-in political system machinery behind them kind of like generating votes. But it is a very open process, and doing so then allows a candidate like Leilani Addison, who has no previous political experience, to get her ideas out there and start to maybe steamroll a campaign that could come out of nowhere in this version of an election and make an impact.
I'm not entirely certain Leilani Addison isn't a fabrication, personally. Like there's a little in the realm of history behind these characters. I was like, she kind of coming out of nowhere. I'm wondering if she's maybe not a fabrication of some political, some party with a political agenda. But that's my opinion. So that's the lore how we got here. Let's go behind the scenes a little bit. How did we get here behind the scenes? When did this process start for you guys? How did we create our candidates? How did the primary process work? How did we get to where we're at behind the scenes?
Well, weirdly enough, it actually started probably in 2013. at least the initial conversations of this idea of, having some kind of election thing where we allow the community to take part in it. Like, because the community interaction is such a big part of this and sort of woven so much into the fabric of this game, that it was like, but it was that sort of thing of like, how do we do this in such a way where it's not, we accidentally don't, elect a bowling ball because people think it'd be funny, which it would be.
Everyone supports Boy to make Boatface as Imperator.
Yeah, totally. But it didn't really kind of get rolling until actually it was last CitizenCon, when at our panel we sort of unveiled. We'd been sort of talking about it, and we're like, hey, it's we're starting to. I don't know if we'd actually established the exact date where the Imperator was supposed to turn over. That we were sort of coming up to that wall.
Yeah, we had the 10-year term limit established,
Yeah.
And then just from the way the lore had been working out, I think it was actually a backer who kindly pointed out that we were rapidly, or reminded us at least, that we were rapidly approaching our term limit on the forums, and so we were like, oh, that's a really good point, and that little seed started putting to the motion of this idea of how we could move forward.
Yeah, and sort of as far as the structure goes, again, we were trying to figure out a way, like how Adam was saying, with this sort of super wide swath in the beginning that eventually narrows down, how would this government approach, electing this type of official, to, again, because, they're coming off of the messers and stuff like that. They would want a way to make it seem like politics is accessible to the people. And plus it gives opportunities to have sort of more eccentric type candidates sort of pop up and, play around with sort of like the, Lord Buckethead thing. If you're familiar with that,
Vermin Supreme. Yeah.
And we had previously established that new citizens take their oath and everything and become citizens on Citizen Day, hence the name on October 10th, CitizenCon. In real life, Citizen Day in lore. And so the idea that new citizens would get the right to vote in this once a decade election was really cool to us. And so we decided to anchor the timing of it around that day of starting the Imperator election at that point. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, so with a lot of other things in Star Citizen, we started with this broad structure that they worked through for CitizenCon last year, and then we started to have meetings after that to slowly start to specify and kind of draw in the details about how the voting timeline would work, what candidates would kind of be interesting and highlight certain themes or aspects of the game that we thought would be interesting, or kind of like play into storylines that were already there. Mira No is a senator from Terra that we've mentioned in lore going back years, so we knew the Terra as capital kind of like theme is something we want to lean into, and she just seemed like a wonderful way to kind of like pull this person who had represented that idea previously in the lore and elevate her to the candidate that's really going to bring that message forward in the election. So it was about kind of getting more specific and then looking back at previous specifics and seeing how we could tie some things together to bring some consistency to the universe.
Okay. And sorry, go ahead, Will.
And if you saw our CitizenCon presentation last year, where we talked about kind of the pertinent issues facing the Empire, that helped us provide a framework. So we came up with what would voters in the universe really care about, what would they be talking about at the time, and laying that out on a grid and making sure that we had candidates with opposing views to make an interesting election for us about, and genuine proposals that we could believe in and see as being viable options. We wanted to make it hard to pick.
Yeah, and also the thing too was sort of like referring to the sort of Bodie McBoatface thing, like because we were sort of opening up this idea of letting the backers elect the Imperator and honoring that, basically, was we wanted to kind of get down to 5 candidates who would potentially challenge us, could throw us curveballs as far as a creative team, as far as like what the political direction of the Empire changes to based on their priorities, but at the same time still have it make sense of like, it's not it's not going to be anything really drastic as far as like a tone change or something like that. So it was finding candidates who had enough personality to make them pop and feel like they were real people who had, ideologies and viewpoints that they could stand on, that again could potentially throw us curveballs, a la, Addison with her stance on AI, terrifies me at night. But again, it's one of those things that's like, we can, we'll work with that. We have to figure out a way to work with that, which would be really, it just sounded very interesting and also kind of a fun way for the community to kind of, again, keep us on our toes and surprise us.
The overwhelming sentiment from the community questions that came in on Spectrum were about, is this real? It's just, is this a real election? Is the voting that begins tomorrow, a real thing that? I'm sorry, we're not. Is it a real thing? And will we honor the winner, no matter who people vote for? And will we actually take the direction of the universe in the direction of this new Imperator?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Yep.
That's why, again, like we didn't want a Bodie McBoatface in there, because that would, people would do it just, if nothing else, to see if, so.
Yeah. I mean, to touch more on what Dave said, like we wanted Imperator candidates who were strong as characters, who had very clear personalities that shone through, and who would have policies that the community could get behind that would affect the story in a very real way.
All right.
Yeah, and just I'm sorry, Jared. One just to kind of add into that, like I was saying, it was a very collaborative process from kind of like specifying how we wanted the election to go, drawing out the characters, Sherry adding a spin when doing the Galactopedia. So we've been slowly specifying and kind of trying to enrich in the world. And I guess with this election, we're essentially asking the backers to help us make a decision as to which direction to take and what lens to kind of help frame the events that are going to occur over the next few years. What is it going to be through a Costigan lens, or is it going to be through an Addison lens? So we're hoping that you guys are going to direct us into which way we kind of like help drive some things going forward. So.
All right, so let's get into some of the backers' lore questions, the questions that they had and were voted up on Spectrum that would maybe sway their particular decisions. First off, overall, how much executive power does the Imperator and the UEE actually possess? Since there's no prime citizen anymore and legislature is mostly in the hands of the Senate, what kind of power and influence does the Imperator actually have?
They're in a lot of ways of setting the agenda for the UE for the next 10 years. They can't enact laws on their own, but they drive the conversation and are representative of kind of the people's will that way. Of if a candidate's coming out saying, I want to shut down Synth World, that becomes an important issue for the next 10 years. It's not a guarantee that will happen because of a democratic system and all the senators have to come on board and vote, and all the systems have their say, but that becomes a major issue at that point.
Yeah, and they also have the ability to appoint people, like the appointment of the High Secretary. So like the High Secretary will have a profound influence on like what infrastructure projects get funded and what don't, that kind of thing. That's on the Imperator to pick someone who'll do a good job.
I think an example. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say they bring in their people. So yeah, as far as the legislative aspect of it, yes, the Senate handles it, but the person in charge of the Senate is picked by, is picked by the Imperator. So
I think a good example from the previous term of Imperator Costigan is the Human Xi'an Trade Initiative, which really opened up how much Xi'an businesses were allowed into the UE space. And that was one of his pet projects, is that he really wanted to push our current, relationship with the Xi'an forward and open that up more. And so that was him driving that conversation, making the votes happen, and cheerleading that policy.
For people who follow the weekly comlinks, and if you're not aware, there's a lore post that goes out publicly on the RobertSpaceIndustries.com website every single Tuesday, as well as lore articles in the Jump Point magazine that goes out every month for subscribers. So there's tons of lore that gets published. In a lot of those sources, there's a lot of mention about how the economy in the UEE is pretty bad at the moment, especially public spending is at a very low point. But since there are no numbers or reports from the government, that's mostly hearsay. Can you give us a little impression of what the economic problems or hardships of this new Imperator is faced with when he or she enters office? This is from a person who reads those posts, by the way.
Sure. I mean, again, the economic struggles are, I mean, again, we're not going to get too detailed as far as like outlining what the GDP of a planet is, because that would fry my brain. But yeah, I mean, they come in, they got a lot of things that they got to deal with. I mean, that's what part of the debate was last week of like, how do you handle the synth world? You have this thing that's completely just draining money, and right now there's sort of no end in sight as far as when they're going to actually accomplish anything. So, if you're looking for a quick financial boost to the economy, cut that thing off and redirect that money into other things. So they got a lot. They got a Vandal military conflict to deal with. They got a thinned out military and law enforcement. They got synth world. They got a bunch of stuff to deal with. So it's going to be fun.
Well, synth world is a scam.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, wow. Take a stand.
It's a money laundering operation as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about Sol and Terra. Are there any credible indications that conflict between Sol and Terra could actually lead to some sort of civil war in the UEE? And if that's a real danger, how would each candidate probably handle this crisis?
I personally think that as long as the war with the Vandal is going on, that military resources in the UEE will be very occupied with that. But once the war with the Vandal ends, if indeed it ends, well, I mean, anything could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a tricky question because, again, like some of our candidates are more right now. The Mirano obviously is the loudest proponent of, part of my goal is that I want to actually enact a transition. Now, whether she can't just say it and it happens. So obviously, like Will said, there's a democratic process that has to happen in order for her to pull it off. So it's no guarantee that even if, say, she wins. But again, kind of the idea is like if she does win, then that would become more of a priority. So it could have its reflections. But again, like if Titus Costigan wins, there's no saying of like there would still be the people who are like advocating for Terra to be the new capital, but it doesn't have as much political clout because
the issue won't go away.
Yeah, Mirano could again try to push the agenda in the Senate, where she's a representative from, but not being the Imperator, the captain of the UEE ship to a certain degree, she doesn't obviously have the power or the authority to then kind of be able to really go in that direction. But she could try legislatively. Yeah.
I mean, the Imperator is the head of the UEE, is the figurehead of the UEE. It's not that type of thing because again, they want to get away from that sort of Messer era thing where there's like I decree this and then that's law, and if you disagree, we'll shoot you.
There's a lot of voices. There's definitely movements on Terra and other systems for separatist things about the UEE's gotten too big. We can't control all these diverse systems with just one centralized government. We should all be ruling ourselves as individual systems. And maybe the loudest version of that is on Terra. But Mirano doesn't take that stance. She believes in the empire, but just wants to see the capital relocated for a Terra-centric view of the government. And it's interesting to think about whether the UEE would go to the point of a civil war if a system applied to separate from the empire, or whether it would be a peaceful transition.
Because there have been, Karen rejected its representation and its recognition after the Messer era. So they did have senators, and they were so disgusted by what happened under the Messers that once they got out, they said, we don't want to be considered a recognized planet, and abandoned their senators, basically, like they vacated their seat. So I think you can again, like, I think to get to armed conflict, there's always a path for it, but it's not necessarily a clear one. It would have to be pretty obvious, like a violent separatist movement trying to kickstart something. But yeah, who knows?
As a follow-up to that, since the Terra Earth thing is now become a campaign issue because of Mira, put yourself in Mira's shoes. She's got a campaign stop on Earth. She's got to convince the people of Earth to vote for her. How does she do this?
I mean,
what's her tact?
What? Sorry, I'll just say this quick before Adam goes on. But one of the things that she wants to do is preserve the ancient buildings, ancient art, ancient history on Earth. So she's not trying to say that we'll abandon Earth and throw it in the garbage or anything.
Isn't
I mean, well, from a certain point of view, like she wants to turn like the ancient institutions and architecture and whatever of Earth into something that we preserve and revere, and like more like a museum or something like that, and less like something that we are burning down by using so many resources on. You know what I mean?
She recognizes Earth as our ancestral home ground.
Yeah.
But like, it's just not we've moved beyond that.
One of the interesting wrinkles in her character I discovered while writing her for this campaign was realizing that we had written her as coming from this long line. Her father, her grandmother were also senators from Terra and have represented the system. So she actually grew up and spent time as a child on Earth. She was raised there for a handful of years. So she's not anti-Earth. She has a deep love and reverence, and out of maybe a lot of the other candidates, she's maybe spent more time on Earth between the Senate and her childhood than a lot of other ones. So this isn't a disregard for the planet. It's a want to preserve it, as you're right, as Sherry was saying, the historical heart, but still kind of like symbolized to the Empire and to our alien allies that humanity is evolving, and we're also, Terra's a better representation of who we are currently and where we want to go from her perspective.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
she's certainly been there more often than than Titus.
Yeah.
So in order to preserve the Earth from the rigors of running an entire galactic empire, we should move the capital to Terra so that Earth can recover.
I think it's also that thing too of, we have that notion of a dark history, and there's a lot of association, I think, of like who we were in sort of our darker times that Earth was sort of the center point of. And with Terra, it's like it's a symbolic gesture as well of like, we are who we are today. We are not who we were back then. So it's to the citizens of Earth, she would probably say like, look, this is not saying that Earth didn't do its job, or it's not, exactly as everyone's been saying, like, it's not a useful planet. It's just that right now we are an evolved society, and this becomes a representation of that evolution, because we have now, this is the planet that we inhabit, that we kind of have treated better. We kind of control it in a much more egalitarian type of way, because we live sort of in harmony with it, rather than Earth, which was overpopulated and kind of torn apart and then rebuilt and stuff like that. So I think it's also that sort of symbolic aspect of it that's important, of like the message it sends to the Xi'an culture, that we're sort of acknowledging our past, but we're moving beyond it.
Earth is old and busted, and Terra is the new hotness.
It smells a little weird. Earth has a little bit of funk.
Have you gone outside yet?
It's the grandma house.
We need to get rid of the mildew, but
Okay, let's move on to Addison a little bit. Addison has pretty strong opinions about the state of AI. Before we get into her views, let's set the table a little bit. What is the current state of AI in the Star Citizen universe?
Well, we haven't really thought about it much. I'm kidding.
That's David Haddock.
Yeah. So there is no AI. It's an endeavor, scientific endeavor that people keep trying to pursue, but it always sort of ends poorly. They've tried in the past. There was the Artemis, which is an AI controlled piloting program that was supposed to take a slow boat colony to the nearest star that disappeared. There was like a traffic thing that they tried to build that just was chaotic and caused a bunch of people to crash and die. It was so in the lore sense, it was always one of those things where like they kept trying to do it, it kept failing, and they just were like, you know what, we're done. But every 10 or 15 or 20 years, somebody's like, I'm the one who's going to solve it, and they do, and then some catastrophe happens. The important thing about the stance on AI is that it's actually the sort of the behind the scenes thing, where the idea was that in the earliest conversations with Chris about the Star Citizen universe, this was pre GDC announcement, was he wanted the universe to feel tactile, and when sort of having discussions about what was it he saw in his head, what was it he wanted to build, he liked the idea that pilots had to get into ships and fly places, and that it was a future where you had to do stuff. It wasn't I have an army of AI minions that I can just send out, because obviously an AI will be better pilot or better gunner or whatever than a human being, but he wanted that Star Wars in the turret firing at TIE fighters thing, like that feeling, rather than just the targeting computer is going to auto lock on it and just blast it from 300,000 kilometers away with pinpoint precision. So that became the goal of, that's the universe we're trying to build. How do we justify that? And so that's how we came up with the idea of, all right, well, they've tried it a bunch of times, because it's just to ignore it doesn't make any sense. So they've just tried it a bunch of times, and for whatever reason, something always goes wrong, and they've just sort of soured on the idea of it. But again, there's that notion of like, it's the sort of holy grail. So there's always somebody out there who's like, I'm going to be the one to crack the nut.
The hubris of creating a new life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's advanced computer systems and robotics in the universe. We have our drones that fly around, but the goal is for players to have to direct their actions, to have to be in control of them. You have simulated simple AI like the greeter on New Babbage, who can have these simulated conversations, but it's very preordained routines.
Chatbot.
Yeah, exactly. So those kind of interactions and friendliness. So the system has gotten towards that, but the desire to have androids or ships that can manage everything from you, humanity has just soured on that overall. For a majority, of course, there are people like Addison who say, we are learning all the time, we can do better, but it's a similar note to what people have said in the past. So it's an interesting dilemma.
She's basically saying previous attempts at AI, advanced AI and synthetic life were stopped when all they could do was stand up on chairs.
No,
but we can do more. Right? No, am I reading? All right, so Addison's views are pro AI. Talk a little bit about her views. Is it just how far is Addison wanting to push this if she's elected?
I think in her initial pitch, she's basically saying some of these simpler systems we have, we're due to open up very restricted research and how we can improve them, because she is of a belief that if we can improve these systems even slightly, they may make things run more efficiently. The massive manufacturing facilities all over our corp might be able to be more efficient, use a lot less electricity. So she's kind of hoping that through additional research, we might be able to advance those to kind of make some of those, I don't know if you want to call them like dummy AI systems, better, and thus kind of lead to new breakthroughs or to new areas that we can go into. The argument against that, obviously, is that once you start it becomes a Pandora's box. Maybe you accidentally discover something that then you can't be stopped or lead to something bigger. So that's the argument against it. But yeah, she's not out here arguing like full AI everything. She's like, hey guys, it's been a few hundred years. We're smart. We can do this in a regulated, smart way by taking these incremental steps potentially. But but there's obviously potential drawback
for regulation, but just for lifting up the restrictions on the initial steps.
Not be superstitious about this, and like, oh, we shouldn't be afraid of the knowledge. Like, it's just let's just be smart about it.
Right now a lot of AI research doesn't get grant money, basically, and she wants them to get grant money.
Well, and a lot of it's illegal.
So candidate Addison, are you prepared to go on the record now and say that you're not willing to follow the boondoggle of synthetic planets by attempting to create synthetic people?
I mean, she wants to give more funding to SynthWorld, so that wouldn't work on her. She'd be like, oh, actually, more money to SynthWorld and more money to AI. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
SynthWorld for synth people.
Yeah.
Well, because again, like, the thing with her SynthWorld thing is also, again, the idea that like in the journey to create SynthWorld, it's going to unlock potential new innovation that could have applications to other things. So it's like, it's not SynthWorld is the goal, but SynthWorld can give, birth to legion of new innovations.
Yeah, what did we learn from the space program? Like all the cool stuff that came out of that, initiative. So
that's the pens.
So behind the scenes.
And tank.
So behind the scenes, if Addison wins, this was also one of the most highly voted questions. If Addison were to win, is that going to mean androids and everything around the corner?
No. Because again, sort of like we were saying before, that might be her directive of like, hey, we need to loosen restrictions, but it doesn't necessarily mean like she takes office and then the next day there's Bishop from Aliens. Like, there's still a process you have to do. And again, she's not even saying that the doors would be flung open on AI. It's just if people are doing AI, they need to prove that basically they're taking safety precautions to minimize loss. They're not taking risky chances. That type of thing. They have to kind of validate what they're doing. So it's not the Wild West with rampant AI, but it also means that like from a sort of a player standpoint that like, that means that there might be more need for resources on scientific bases and stuff like that. Like, because they're getting more funding to do stuff, down the line, there's more kind of impact on various companies.
Gotcha. So if Addison wins, we're not talking about Voight Kemp tests a year later or anything.
No, I
maybe
mean,
10 years later.
Yeah, it'll change the tone of the kind of missions. Like, rather than like getting sent to investigate rumors of an illegal lab on a moon that might be doing illegal research, you're getting sent to an official lab that maybe is having issues. That kind of difference. And so there's different ways we can explore what happens when this grant clears. Like, are we going to see another disaster unfold in real time? Is there a breakthrough that messes up with people or changes the way it is? So, and these are also hooks that we talk to design about. It often inspires them as well, and kind of what we've talked about before of our cyclical kind of design style of design and narrative feeding into each other. So it'll be interesting. That's true for like all of these, like, when we have like talked about how the advocacy will have changes, or how does it affect the militia systems, and hopefully all that feeds back into how we're thinking about missions and stuff for all the candidates.
Yeah, this is, like I said, why your vote matters, because it gives us the lens through which we'll be making narrative and design decisions going forward. So just based on whoever you say should be steering the ship, it'll definitely trickle on down to a lot of the decisions going forward on our end.
So we've talked about a couple candidates here, Mirano, Addison. Let's touch on Costigan a bit. How is the younger Costigan going to be any different than the one we have now?
Well, he'll have less political experience.
And he looks a little bit less like Ortwin.
He does look a little less like Ortwin. Did you have any problems with that, getting that approved?
Just personal ones.
Costigan I love as a storyline, because the idea of humanity on a whole coming off the Messer regime, of where it was unquestionable everyone was going to be related. Anyone in charge was going to have the last name Messer. So we finally got away from that, and we're coming up to this first chance to vote for back-to-back Imperators named Costigan. And
don't like it.
A lot of people have an intrinsic reaction to not liking it, but there are some people in the verse who want that clear dynastic kind of inheritance and are drawn to it. And a lot of people are saying we shouldn't even consider that, but just take the candidate on his own merits. And so he
doesn't have merits.
I was going to say, does he have any allure behind the dynasty thing?
essentially he has been successful in the private sector, which is something that he is basically trumpeting. He's also been slyly trying to say, hey, I've been watching my dad do this for 10 years, so even though I have no political experience, I understand what it takes to actually be in this position. He's like, I've got a unique viewpoint into it, which is always
I've
an
operated in these circles. And,
he's which is a weird thing. It's a weird needle for him to try to thread, but he is trying to push that. And so I think experience running a multi-system massive corporation can have some comparisons to government.
Well, and the thing too, I mean, bear in mind that Kilos Costigan was the High Secretary before he was Imperator. So I mean, for most of Titus's life, he's been around politics. So he's sort of come up around it. He knows the players, he knows the people. He probably gets more of a unfiltered view, from his dad about how things work. So yeah, he's trying to
by watching you.
I mean, that's what he's selling.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I think, like, if you look at the current economic state that we talked a little bit about earlier with the UE and how that's wanting to shift, like, the cost of government is very high right now, and they need more income coming in. You look at the past couple decades of, like, the sale of Stanton system, where businesses are taking a larger role in government, and that line is kind of starting to blur more. And Costigan represents that next evolution of business forward government, getting rid of some of the restrictions that control how businesses act and where, and letting a much more pure version of capitalism to take form, which a lot of people think would be good for the UEE. So
yeah, particularly when you're dealing with kind of a strained economy, they want to bring in that sort of business and that sort of business innovation to help refuel things and re-excite things and get them back on the upswing.
You mentioned relaxing some restrictions and stuff. Let's talk about LaSalle for a little bit. LaSalle, and forgive me if I'm wrong, LaSalle is the one who wants to redesign the Fair Chance Act.
That's right. He wants to allow mining and other possible business things to happen in systems that are protected by the Fair Chance Act.
All right, so because it's always somebody's first show here,
sure.
Give us a quick primer on the Fair Chance Act and why we would want to keep it and why we would want to change it.
So it was a initiative that was enacted after the fall of the Messer. It was one of the first ones that was initiated, basically fall of the dictators who had basically terraformed a planet with a developing, evolving species on it that was probably going to achieve sentience. So they terraformed it, which completely destroyed their environment and killed all of them. And the sort of fallout from that, they kind of were laughing and drinking while they were pointing at the bodies. And so footage of that kind of got out, and that's what kind of sparked the revolution that overthrew them. So the new government set up a thing basically saying that if you come across a planet that has a developing species defined as they are showing aspects of higher thought that might develop, that it's the planet will be sealed off basically and protected by the government and military, and no one is allowed to interfere with the species in their development until they're able to, and pro or con. So if they start fighting each other, you let them fight. But until they become spacefaring, in which case then we would make contact with them. So they have to get up to that point on their own, and then we would reach out to them. But yeah, so LaSalle is basically saying it's obviously you cut off entire planets from strip mining.
Well, and he's saying that it's been applied too broadly. Like, we look at some of the systems that are now fair chance systems, and there's systems that are just of scientific interest that have no life that have been declared fair chance systems. There's systems where the intelligent species, he would argue, some scientists say aren't, and so there's some question there. And just about that, the Fair Chance Act has been the sledgehammer of a law to block development, and he wants to take a more refined, careful approach to it.
Yeah, and the Fair Chance Act has been around since like the early 2800s, I believe. So like 150 years in the Star Citizen universe. So I believe a lot like Mir Know with the AI, he's saying we should.
Addison.
It's time for us.
Addison.
Addison, excuse me. It's time for us to go back and kind of like re-examine and update this policy for the modern world, for these maybe new modern technologies that would allow us to maybe go extract resources from places that might have life, but may not end up affecting their development. So I think that's part of the angle he's trying to get to, is saying like, I don't want to get rid of this, but let's just redefine it and let's modernize it.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to present that he is walking a fine line between protecting a planet that only has cellular life, that has the Fair Chance Act applied to it, and protecting a planet that has multiple sentient species who may or may not be engaging in warfare. He's trying to present that he doesn't want to strip mine planets with like provable proto-sentient or sentient species, but maybe that planet that just has cellular life, I mean, why are we protecting it anyway?
Damn.
Yeah.
That is his stance.
And do they taste good?
Do they taste good?
Only one way to find out.
What garnish goes best with them?
Right. Our fifth candidate is Sherrod, and the thing I remember from Sherrod is her stance on that Synthworld is a scam. Am I overstating that? Sherrod wants to stop Synthworld in its tracks, reevaluate, make it stop hemorrhaging and bleeding money from the entire galaxy. This seems like a pretty good thing to me.
Yeah, basically she's the current High Secretary of under Costigan. So she's hoping that she kind of steps up into his role. But yes, I mean, her sort of thing is like, we need to hit the brakes on Synthworld. They need to prove, unless they can prove definitively, like, hey, we got a timeline for this, or we're making legitimate progress, we're going to think about shuttering that program.
Yeah, she's also as High Secretary for the past like 8 years. She, I believe, has seen how much the infrastructure of the Empire could use an update. So one of her campaign promises was to fund a infrastructure project in each system in the Empire, and I really think she would, in her heart, believes credit should go to improving infrastructure in these systems rather than the synth world right now, or at least until, as Dave said, there is a clear plan for the synth world. So she's got the economic state in her mind, because she's been dealing with this for these past 8 years, and she is prioritizing the infrastructure improvements over synth world at this moment.
Yeah, and she personally, in her career as High Secretary and before, she makes it a priority to try to tighten loopholes and to root out corruption where she sees it. So, in my opinion, she sees Synthworld as something that has not had the oversight that it needs in order to justify the continual cost.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities for graft and sort of people to take advantage of it by charging $30,000 for pens and stuff like that.
Yet, if I were one of her competitors, I would say it has gotten out of hand under her watch.
But technically, again, because she's, Costigan empowered her, like, she's his High Secretary. So I think her counter argument is like, I was doing my job because I was enacting the policies that Costigan wanted to do. So she's not throwing him under the bus, but just saying like, she's a soldier, like she's following what she was told to do. But.
Yeah. Also, he hasn't endorsed her, so I mean, she can say whatever she wants.
and who's to say that she didn't wasn't privately saying like, Kilos, we need to cut this synthworld crap, and him going, no, I like it. I want to, I like $30,000 pens.
Hey, they write upside down.
Yeah,
gotta be
great.
with it.
Or you can just use a pencil. Sherry, you bring up a good point that the current Imperator has not endorsed a candidate. Is he planning to?
He is not. He is a member of the Universalist Party, and usually the Imperator who is in charge, who is a member of one of the political parties that has a candidate, will endorse the candidate of their political party. But in this case, there are two Universalist candidates, and one of them is his son. So he decided, or in my opinion, this is what he decided, because he has not outright said anything yet, that he had to make a choice between backing what his party wanted with Sherrod and backing what his son wanted. So he chose instead to do nothing.
Yeah. And I saw this question on the forums too about multiple candidates from the same party, and it's like it's totally loud and has happened in the past. It's become less in favor because the parties feel like it splits their vote and hurts their chances at taking the Imperator seat. So usually someone, when they make the primaries, will potentially drop out or back one of the other candidates. But this has happened in the past where you have enough candidates who believe that they have the rightful heir to the throne, so to speak, and which was maybe a poor choice of terms in beginning Costigan. But yeah, so it's uncommon but not unheard of in the Imperator election.
Yeah, and we like that bit of diversity within how the parties run themselves. You know, how we tried to, like, the Universalist, it's like best ideas come forward. The Transitionalist, the Mira Knows party kind of coalesced around her because she is the most prominent figure in that party right now. And Paul LaSalle seemingly was running the Centralist Party for years prior to the election as a way to kind of freeze out potential other candidates, is what his opponents would say. So I just thought it was interesting how we could give the different parties a little bit of flavor by giving how they deal with their Imperator candidates a little differences.
We've got just a couple minutes left. Let's step behind the scenes a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the story and all. And remember, folks, that there's the post on the RobertSpaceInitiatives.com website that details the bios for everybody, and then a whole host of links on that page to previous lore posts, as well as the Galactopedia articles where you can learn all about it before you begin casting your vote tomorrow. Let's take some behind the scenes questions here. The candidates all appear to either be right-wing, centrist, or barely pushing center-left in this person's opinion. Why are there no extreme left-wing candidates?
I mean, weirdly enough, I for me at least, like when we were looking at these, I wasn't sort of thinking of like doing one-to-one analogs of like, oh, this person's right-wing or left-wing or central. Like, I don't really care. Like, it was more of just like, it was once we came up with sort of like the 5 topics of like the synth world, the Vanduul, the economy, Xeno relations, stuff like that. It was just sort of like filling out a chart of like
who's going to be for what
and who's against them, like that kind of thing. So they, as a lineup, made sense, and then kind of give them that sort of sprinkling of the. But that's just me. I mean,
there's also a lot of traditionally left, quote unquote, policies that are already law within the UEE. You know, the idea of universal healthcare, universal education, universal housing. So the Empire on a whole has kind of these backbones to it, which maybe is why they didn't come up so much in this election versus the people who are voicing objections to it because of the status quo. So it is one thing to kind of consider that, like the current position of the UEE and how these candidates are reacting to it.
I think when I was reading the posts, and I've been following along as they've been going up and everything, the sense that I get, and we have not had this conversation, so you feel free to tell me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but the sense that I have gotten from reading your posts on this, going back to 2012, and especially over the last year, is that simply running a galaxy is a lot more complicated than pointing everything in this direction or pointing everything in this direction. Yeah, running a galaxy exists in the gray areas.
That was always, again, like, you know, that was one of the core tenets that Chris wanted when going. It was like, we did not want the evil empire. We did not want everyone good. There was a lot of gray. You kind of like people. You didn't like people. It was just tough to kind of
nuance to decision making.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but one of my favorite comments I like to see in any of the Imperator articles is when people start to debate policy positions and about how, oh, I really like this candidate because of this, but I really don't like that about that candidate. So I like that yeah, there are no straight white knights or straight kind of like terrible. Like there's shades of gray all around, because if there's a perfect politician out there, I've never met her. I've never heard about him. So I wanted to make sure that we had a bit of that diversity of opinion even within candidates trickle on down through everyone.
And I mean, we had some of the more extremes in the earlier ones. Like there was, I can't remember his name, but there was the guy who was sort of like the real hardcore, like, I
Human
hate tomorrow
first.
and human first type
Right,
dude.
right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Calvin
but again,
Derry.
Oh,
He
yeah.
didn't get past the primaries, right? Yeah.
No.
Obviously.
No.
No, we got to the second round.
He got to the second round
Yeah.
of the
Did he?
He just
He
he
didn't get
yeah
that.
he didn't get past the secondary
He
vote.
didn't get this. Okay.
Yeah.
But it became one of the things, again, going back to what we were saying earlier, of like, we want to, yes, the community is picking, but we wanted to kind of keep it a little hemmed in, just so we didn't it didn't take us in a direction that we're like, I'm not sure if the game would necessarily want to go that way. So that's why we kept them kind of the way we did.
And if you go back and look at those primary candidates, those are touching on storylines that we want to have in the universe for you to come across, even though they're not the main political views. That human first initiative we want to have as a thread going on. And there's a lot of, he made it that far in the election process. So there's a lot of people who agree with that, even though it's a controversial stance. So we want that to come out when you're exploring the verse of running into people who feel this way.
Okay. So just because somebody doesn't win this election does not mean that's the last you're going to see of them in the ongoing story of Star Citizen.
Yeah.
No, I'd personally like to see Kasi run for the next Imperator.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Suj Kosi was the first Tavaran elected to the Senate. So, and that was in a senatorial election we did 3-4 years ago. Yeah.
Senate elections are a whole different beast, happen at a different time.
Yeah. I was actually surprised.
Every 5 years.
I was a little surprised that she didn't manifest in this one. I thought that was kind of obvious. Maybe that's why it didn't happen, because it was obvious.
Well, we couldn't do posters yet.
Yeah, I think Kasi needs a little bit more experience.
Okay.
It's long term. It's long term.
Just to throw out one quick
Slow burn.
answer to one of the questions on here. Will there be machines or polling stations in the game? Right now, the voting is only on the website, just to clear it. It's something we want to look at down the road. But for now, make your voice heard on the website. In the game, though, you can go check out some awesome election posters and
audio clips.
and kind of election ads that are in 3.11.0 that just got released. So please, I think those are really cool. So you should see them around stations and stuff.
Okay. Last question before we let you go. Who are you voting for?
Addison. Chaos.
Right.
I don't know. I might go Mirano, just to stir things up. I think I like her policies, but she's fun. She's got some interesting. It'd be that or Addison, because Addison is definitely, like, as much as AI unsettles me, it would be an interesting challenge to have to deal with creatively.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Sherrod honestly does have good ideas and good policies. So if I were thinking about it from like a long-term even economical standpoint, I think she'd probably do the best job. But my heart is with Addison. Sorry.
Okay. Well, Will?
I'm not going to say. It's a private vote.
That's fair.
Adam, did you have a vote?
It's so tough because I've had to get inside the head of all 5 of these candidates and try to understand their pitch, what they're for and what they're against. But my parents are both educators. And Addison kind of comes from that background, and I think I would probably vote for her just for fun. But I think Sherrod might be a better choice for the actual game world. So it's there's that divide between like out of universe Adam versus in-universe Adam. And
lead writer Will is excited about all these candidates by the possibilities they're going to offer, and I hope the community. I hope to be surprised by them. I'm real excited. I've been seeing the debates following along, and it's been absolutely fantastic. So thank you for all being so excited about participating in this conversation. It's meant a lot.
Yeah, it's very cool. Thank you, everyone.
No, for myself, I think I'm going to vote for Sherrod for a very selfish reason.
What is that?
Synth World?
I never want to see the Sith world finished. I want to be able to fly around it like the like the partially constructed Death Star from Return of the Jedi. I never wanted to see it finished.
There we go.
So
I
I
mean,
will.
I-
The Olympic Stadium in Akira.
Yeah, exactly. So
Like-
exactly. I want a
Oh,
giant,
yeah.
partially constructed synthetic planet to explore.
Turn it
and
into
to
a race
visit.
course.
I never
Oh.
want it finished for what I
It'd be
want
really
the game.
fun to like
So.
Salvage abandoned parts from it too.
Yep. So
Wouldn't that be great?
So I'm voting for Rod. Even if there's just a slight chance that it could push development towards that.
Makes sense
That's-
why you
that's
were
where my
slandering Addison earlier too. Then yeah, I see what you're doing.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here on the show. That's our show. As we usually do, we are going to throw the raid to a Star Citizen streamer who is playing right now. And the Star Citizen streamer we are raiding today is Nerd Show and Tell. He's a terrific streamer, has possibly the most impressive streaming setup I've ever seen for a human being on this planet. It's almost too much. And I'm not jealous at all. And when you go there and you join them, say, Jared is not jealous at all. So for Star Citizen Live, I'm Jared. That's Dave. That's Will. That's Adam. And that was Sherry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.